Let's hear about hard heads and broken swords. Hey folks, Matt Easton here, scholagladiatoria. So let's have another tale about a Victoria Cross award from the excellent book, The Victoria Crosses That Saved an Empire, the story of the VCs of the Indian Mutiny by Brian Best. A book I highly recommend. It's great reading. Every story is a ripping yarn, and this is about James Blair. I don't know whether he's any relation to Tony Blair, probably not. Blair's a Scottish name, I believe. James Blair was born in India, and he was the son of a Bengal cavalry officer, so he was very much born into the service. But the thing which really interested me was that in this story we hear about a broken sword. Now I happen to have a sword of the era here. This is it's actually a rifle officer's sword, 1827 pattern, but it has the same type of blade that James Blair would have been using, although he may have been using indeed the cavalry version, which is very slightly longer than this, but essentially the same kind of sword, same kind of blade at least. And so let's have a look. It says, for having on the night of the 12th of August at Neat in volunteering to apprehend 7 or 8 armed mutineers who'd shut themselves up for defence in a house. This obviously being mutineers as in the Indian Mutiny, so rebels, and they'd shut themselves in a house, and he rushed in, bursting the door open, he rushed in amongst them and forced them to escape to the roof, thinking of a flat roof here, okay, so they're looking for a way out, they're trying to scarper, understandably, probably outnumbered and very scared. In this encounter he was severely wounded. In spite of his wounds, he pursued the fugitives but was unable to come up with them, to catch up with them, in consequence of the darkness of the night. So lucky for them, they escaped. But in the second action, he was part of the column sent from Nazirabad to retake Neat, one of 2 hard-fought battles en route, 2 hard-fought actions rather en route. And the citation for his Victoria Cross commendation read, on the 23rd of August, October 1857, at Jiram, in fighting his way most gallantly through a body of rebels who'd literally surrounded him, after breaking the end of his sword on one of their heads, and I'll come back to this in a minute, and receiving a severe sword cut on his right arm. Sword arm, we assume that he's right-handed. He then rejoined his troop. In his wounded condition, and with no other weapon than the hilt of his broken sword, so half a blade we can imagine, he put himself at the head of his men and charged the rebels most effectively and dispersed them. So there we go. I'll put the book down now. First of all, there are several interesting things there. First of all, he broke his sword on someone's head. Now you might think, what, it must have been a piece of crap sword. Well, funnily enough, there are actually lots of accounts of swords breaking in combat. I've spoken about this in previous videos, but interestingly, a lot of the accounts that I have personally come across, particularly from the 19th century, are on people's noggins. And really the point to say is that heads are really quite tough. They're big lumps of bone, and if we look at John Musgrave Waite's treatise from 1880, the main source that I teach sabre from, he specifically says when you're chopping someone in the head, aim at eye level or downwards, because these of course are the thinner bone, softer, squishier bits of a person's body. And if you are hitting someone in the head, well, you want to do the most damage possible, so you aim for the soft and squishy bits. And of course, hitting someone in the side of the head, the level with the eyes, or indeed the jaw or the neck, is still going to put them out of action. Evolution, of course, has created a hard, bony lump over our brain to protect our brain. So if you can cut into the top of the head, that's great, but it is risky and you can break, particularly lighter blades, lighter sabres, and obviously things like a rapier, I would suggest, would have quite a good chance of breaking on someone's head. So aiming for the sides of the head and indeed the neck is going to do just as much damage in terms of putting them out of action, but have a lot less chance of breaking. The second thing to really note about this is that he wasn't completely useless for the rest of his men by the very fact that he had a broken sword. If you look at the swords of this period, they have distal taper all the way along, but they get particularly flatter or thinner from about the centre of percussion to the point. This is to make the blade light and nimble, make it more effective for thrusting, at least into unarmoured targets, and indeed more effective for cutting as well. But that does mean that this portion of the blade is more liable to break if you hit a hard target than further down here. This portion of the blade is the thickest and the strongest. So if a blade broke hitting someone on the head, we assume he hit them with the centre of percussion, and we assume that's the point at which the sword broke. So he would have lost about 8 or 10 inches of the blade. But now you're left with essentially a hanger or a machete or a barong. So in actual fact, despite the fact you've lost the tip of your sword, and that is a disadvantage, it's a reach disadvantage both for cutting and of course definitely for thrusting, and the fact that breaking probably straight across, it wouldn't leave you very well equipped for thrusting with the sword anymore, but nevertheless it's still a useful weapon. And certainly for defending, remember that you defend with the base of a blade, so in defence terms actually your sword would still be pretty much as good as it was in the first place. So there we go, heads can be very hard, but a broken sword is not necessarily a useless sword. Cheers folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon, or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.